Hello folks, welcome to Lexi IS Academy. In this video, we will be discussing a current affair topic presented to you by a faculty, Sushma KP. Now, if you're someone who likes to know about local news, national news, international events, then subscribe to Legacy IS Academy channel as we provide deep insights into each of these topics. Now, what is the topic that we are going to be discussing about today? It is about your Strait of Hormuz crisis in 2026. First and foremost, as usual, I'll tell it to you like a small story so you will understand the background of it. Your USA and its ally Israel hit Iran in a preemptive strikes, a surprise attacks. Now, Iran started carrying out what was called as retaliatory strikes in 2026. In this, if you see, there is one important critical junction called as Strait of Hormuz. On the north, it is bound by Iran, south, it is by Oman. So what happened is, before war, if you see Strait of Hormuz, so many of ships used to pass in the transit. But after the war broke out, hardly a handful of vessels are passing by. Also recently what happened is your USA had made sure, okay, your Iranian ships, okay, which was bound to your Sri Lanka, right, which was carrying huge amount of cargo, was captured. And also another vessel which was bound to be carrying huge amount of crude oil, okay. First was crude oil and second was they held it telling that, okay, this has huge military reinforcement, so we are capturing it. As a retaliation to this, Iran further, okay, has more of captured two of the vessels within its territories. Now what happened is, if you see Strait of Hormuz, 20% of global oil trade and your energy happens through this strait. It's more like a global choke point. Now, in this point of time, your completely energy hungry countries like India, China, Japan, who all get their oil from this particular zone, were now at a very difficult position. India was at more difficult position because your US had put sanctions on India to not purchase Russian oil. Then they ended up giving a 1 month waiver, that is a separate thing. But what happened here was, in this, Iran and India, let's just speak from this perspective. Initially, Iran allowed for certain vessels backed from certain countries to pass through. One such country that benefited from this was your India. India flagged vessels were allowed to pass through. Now, initially, there has been many reports that state that Iran had charged a huge number of fee for vehicles to, that is vessels to pass through in this transit. It amounts to much more than $1 million per vessel is also something that has been held. When asked India, India held that no, we have not paid any such duties or taxes or fees. We are simply following freedom of navigation. Now see, one thing if you see about your high seas or water itself as a common topic, about 12 nautical miles, okay, you have territorial sovereignty and you will allow innocent passage in that. Innocent passage means something that does not affect or pose any threat to the country. Now, post your 12 nautical miles to certain extent, you have your sovereignty over your resources. Post that, when you come to high seas, that is completely, it has to follow freedom of trade and navigation. When I say trade here, I am meaning merchant ships should have complete freedom. But now what has happened means your US and Iran ka war pe, your US is blockading the ships. Your Iran is making it difficult for your vessels to cross through the transit. Right? Now two important questions will come through. Can USA unilaterally impose sanctions, make blockades without even your UN approval? First question. Second question is, can Iran really monetize on your Strait of Hormuz? Doesn't it affect your freedom of trade? This is what we will be, freedom of trade and also freedom of navigation. Okay. So this is what we will be discussing in the course of the video. Now, according to your UN clause, United Nations Conventions on the Law of Sea, which has been, now your UN clause, by the time it had to come, it was a 2-decade-old difficulty where they had to bring it into picture. Finally, in 1994, it came through, where the governing principles are oceans are seen as a more of a global commons. It is not meant for any one particular state or one particular nation. No one can claim sovereignty over your high seas. So they are trying to balance sovereignty with freedom of navigation. This is applying to all your coastal as well as your landlocked states. Now if you see what are the maritime zones, that is division of a country and water. 0 to 12 nautical miles is territorial waters, which you have full sovereignty of a coastal state, and innocent passage, that is your vessels, merchant ships, all these things can pass through. Now even when we tell innocent passage, which means that it poses no threat to the country or state. 12 to 200 nautical miles is your exclusive economic zone or EEZ, where you have control of resource rights but have no complete sovereignty. And then comes high seas beyond 200 nautical miles. Here no state has any complete sovereignty, and it is about completely freedom of navigation. This is where your merchant ships have much more autonomy. Now if you see with respect to Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz doesn't technically qualify under high seas, but rather it is coming under your transit passage. Okay, so your Strait of Hormuz connects your Persian Gulf to Arabian Sea. Almost roughly 20% of global oil and trade passes through this particular route, and this particular strait also comes under your UN clause under transit passage. So what is the concept of transit passage means? See, because it is coming under this definition of transit passage, there are certain do's and don'ts you can do in this particular area. So what can happen in a transit passage means there has to be continuous expeditious movement, which means you should not be stopping there. You should just move the vessels there. Next, no obstruction is allowed by any state here. Understanding? And also it cannot be suspended. The transit cannot be suspended even in the case of conflict. That is what your USA and Iran are in the midst of doing. While your US offered for peace talks, Iran brought back the issue of Strait of Hormuz back on table, telling that Iran alone will be controlling Strait of Hormuz and it should be able to levy the fee. Why? Because it felt that okay, this at least will be an attempt in restructuring the economy, which is now completely very much affected. Okay, but again, because of the ceasefire that broke down, that is with respect to the peace talk that has broken down, nothing fruitful has yet happened. So there is a broader rights here for innocent passage. Again, innocent passage here does not have any harm for the state or the coastal city. Now first and foremost, can Iran restrict the transit? Because I told you, your Strait of Hormuz, north pe Iran, south pe Oman. So your Iran cannot block or deny passage. It cannot impose tolls arbitrarily, nor can it discriminate between flag states. Recently, your IRGC even ended up shooting at 2 of your Indian flagged merchant vessels. Then again, India raised concerns with your Iranian embassy also. What exactly Iran can do is, it can regulate navigation safety, it can define shipping lanes and make sure the passage is non-threatening. This is what your Iran can do. Now, the second question, USA blockade, is it even legal in this place? And it is not like USA is imposing it for the first time. It has did it for your Venezuela also, Cuba also. So first and foremost, your USA always tries to impose something in the name of your economic blockade and naval pressure. Okay, that is what is happening here, especially in this case, it is not authorized by your United Nations. Your United States cannot unilaterally impose sanctions unless and until it is coming from international law. In this case, it is not coming from an international law, and it is interfering severely with your high seas freedom. So what your exceptions are for having any exceptions or restrictions on your transit means, UNSC has to approve it. The flag state must give consent for this blockade, or if it is a stateless vessel, that is, it does not belong to any particular state. In this case, interventions are possible. But your US blockade is coming under your grey zone of international laws. Now, interception of ships. When exactly can you intercept a ship? First and foremost, when there is, again defined under your international law, when there is a piracy issue, or your slave trade, or is it a stateless vessel, or it is in pursuit of any particular vessels, or it is authorized by your United Nations. When exactly can you not, or what exactly can you not do on high seas is arbitrary seizure on high seas. You cannot seize any vessel just on your own, and economic sanctions which are enforced without United Nations banking. Okay, so this shows that both the question of USA's blockade and Iran's toll, both are in your legally questionable zones. So US interception of Iranian ships or your Iran's detention of ship is as a retaliatory move, both are legally questionable. Now, what is this concept of that we spoke about, innocent versus transit passage? Innocent passage means simple. In your territorial waters, when you are trying to pass, where you have complete sovereignty, there you must not threaten the vessel, or your merchant vessel in this case should not threaten the coastal state, and it can be temporarily suspended, and it is strictly subject to only ships. When you see in your transit passage, like your Strait of Hormuz, these are international straits. One strict condition is continuous movement has to happen. Can it be suspended? No, it cannot be suspended. In this place, ships, aircraft, submarines, all these movements will also be looked into. So if you say what is the strategic importance and importance of this to India, first and foremost, 20% of global oil trade happens through this. Your India's energy security is also largely dependent here. Okay, especially in, that when we had a crunch with your Russian oil sanctions, and also this becomes a critical choke point for an energy hungry nation. Now, what are the international organizations that would be involved here if there arises furthermore issue? Is your IMO, International Maritime Organization, which looks into your maritime safety, conflict mediation, and your shipping lane protection. Then is your UNSC, which is dealing with your enforcement, authorization, or escalation management. Then is your ICJ also, we can bring in here to an extent for legal dispute resolution. Okay, so these are your international organizations. What is India's position with this? See, like as mentioned, India supports freedom of navigation, and it denies paying any sort of tolls for movement of its vessels in Iran. And also, when your IRGC filed at Indian flagged vessels, it has taken up the issue with your Iranian embassy. Okay, so what exactly can we have, let's say, a takeaway of situation from your Strait of Hormuz? Means, first and foremost, UN clause governs all of this. Okay, your oceans are considered as common asset for everyone. No one state can have complete sovereignty of these. Second, transit passage through Hormuz is non-suspendable. Okay, and also Iran's toll as well as US blockade, both are coming under your legally questionable aspects. Understanding? With this, we come to the end of the content. If you like our content, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, share it along with your friends. Thank you.